The People's Business is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
Good evening and welcome to The People's Business. I'm Wendy Burke. This evening, our topic for discussion, NIS, Securing the Future. To discuss the topic, my panel consists of the Honorable Colin Rawdon, the Minister of Labour, Social Security and the Third Sector. We also have Rawdon Adams, the Deputy Chairman of the National Insurance Scheme, Kim Tudor, the Chief Executive Officer of the NIS, and Mr. Derek Osborne, the Consultant Actuary with the NIS. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to The People's Business. We also want to welcome you, our viewers, to the program this evening. We'll be back after the break to get started. And we're back. And I'm going to toss first to the Honorable Colin Rawdon, our Minister of Labour and Social Security, on this issue of the NIS and the pensionable age being raised. Now, the whole issue is that it serves as a protection measure for our society to ensure that we can all benefit from this contributory system. Minister Rawdon?
Thank you very much, Wendy. Yes, thank you very much, and good evening to viewers, good evening to fellow panelists. The matter of the pensionable age is but one of a number of measures, and so is not to be seen as the silver bullet. It is not on its own with respect to revitalizing the Social Security, the National Insurance Scheme. It is one of a number of measures that is designed, as you've indicated, to extend the life of our social security system, which is our national insurance scheme, by another 25 to 30 years. That was the intention. We indicated as we shared the actuarial review, the 17th actuarial review with the public in an extensive series of consultations, that we had an issue, not immediately, we were not encouraged, but there was a matter on the horizon. We believe that as a government, we ought to address matters in a proactive way rather than waiting until we get to a crisis situation. And so, working through all the proposals that came from our consultations, doing all the modeling that was required, the adjustment to the pensionable age is one of the measures recommended by the board and accepted by the cabinet.
Okay. Now, in terms of, you mentioned that it is not the silver bullet and it is not the only measure that's been implemented to help in terms of securing our pensions. If I could throw to you now, Mr. Adams, as the Deputy Chair of the NIS, what are some of the other critical factors that were taken into account in order to be able to sustain our scheme?
Well, good evening, Wendy, and good evening to fellow panelists and viewers. Minister Rawdon talked about the increase of 1 year to 68. That's not a today measure, by the way. That happened over 11 years, and it is, as he said, it's one of many interdependent and overlapping measures that have to work together. So really, these are divided into two categories: those that work on the cost side, where we're trying to ensure that the benefits that are paid out don't run too far ahead of the other side, which is the income side. So it is probably fairly widely known now that we did not recommend an increase in the contribution rate. So that is not one of the recommendations, but we did highlight a need for increased focus on compliance and securing a better collection rate from those who owe the NIS money. That's very, very important. And we also focused quite a lot on what we could do to improve the rate of return on the portfolio of the National Insurance Fund, the assets that it has under management. And you may have seen that one of those involved an agreement with the central bank that would allow the NIS to exchange some of the cash that it has in Barbados dollars for US dollars. That asset just changes form. It's always been part of the NIS. It always continued to be part of the NIS. But what it allows the fund to do is to diversify its holdings more broadly in a way that lowers the overall risk of the portfolio whilst not affecting the return. In fact, it should enhance the return. So those are the two on the income side: better compliance and improved rate on the portfolio. On the cost side, I'll cover a couple quickly, but I will leave some of the detail to our actuary to go through. So we have increased, for example, the number of contributions it takes to qualify for a pension from 500 weeks to 750 weeks. In general, this was a matter of fairness as well as reflecting the real actuarial cost of contributions when you look at them alongside the benefits that can be drawn. So, for example, before the change, it was actually possible for some contributors to secure a minimum pension and the full refund of all their contributions in as little as 14 months. That's very, very quick, and it puts in peril the long-term sustainability of the fund. So that is one area we looked at in particular. We've also changed the formula calculation so that it's no longer looking at someone's 5 best years of contributions, but their 10 best years. Similarly, this is about fairness and encouraging participation, long-term participation in the fund. We did detect that there was some gaming of the system whereby people would pay 5 years at a strong rate and then lower the rate overall. We wanted to eliminate that. Okay. And we made an adjustment on the cost of living such that I'll take one step backwards for a moment. There's no formal tie between the income we pull in and the benefits we pay out. Some countries have a formal link. For example, if the number of contributors declines, they will pay out less money in benefits. We don't do that. But we have put in a cost of living control, if you like, that this year will increase pensions by 3%, but puts a cap on it at 1.5% after that. Now, that there is an exemption to this if inflation was to go well above 1.5%, the actuary would be called in to advise what would be an appropriate rate. But that cost of living adjustment really does allow us to have some level of discretion over benefit expenditure, such that it is in line with some of the income that we're pulling in.
Okay, and
I think at that point it might be useful to call in the actuary.
Right, that's what I was just about to throw to, so that he can explain to us how some of these calculations have come about, because a lot of people have been hearing the changes in the weeks. They're getting a bit antsy because there are people who sit and calculate their pensions before they even become pensionable.
Right, so thank you, Wendy, and good evening, everybody, all listeners and viewers. So if you think about pensions and you think about somebody who is now 10 or 20 years old, the promise that NIS is making is really a very long-term promise. So we know that they're already existing, and in 40, 50 years' time, it will be their turn to get a pension. And so when we project the Barbados economy, we project the population, and then NIS, we realize that there's a shortfall in contributions compared to the payouts, hence the need for the reforms that have been made. And so, as Mr. Adams said, the changes, the scheme is now over 50 years old, and in the beginning there were some generous provisions so that those who qualified in the early years got a good benefit. That's no longer necessary. And so the goal of the reforms is to bring equity and balance, and also some some adjustment mechanisms that should things like inflation be too high, then there's some ways to control that. Should contributions or even compliance improve to an extent where the fund is now better than projected, it's possible to reverse some of those measures that were thought about in the past. And so it's a moving target. Every 3 years, the actuary is called in to make these projections. And depending on the economy and the outlook for the Barbados population, then the results may vary from time to time. But it's a combination of both economic factors and also NIS performance factors, such as compliance, investment returns, and how well they can control benefit payments.
As a follow-up to that, will that control and that alteration, will it at any point with the changes in inflation in the economy, etc., reduce anyone by, say, a quarter to a half, or aren't the percentiles that high?
Right. So anybody who's already a pensioner and in payment, there is no adjustment to them at all. The same formula for cost of living adjustments in January, that remains, but the cap is now 1.5% per year. For those people who were already 60 at the time of the change of the pensionable age, the 500 weeks still would be in place. So for those people who are up to 7 years away from pensionable age, the 10 years of contributions or 500 weeks is still in place. So the changes are not intended to affect those people who are near to retirement, but it gives time to those people who are far from retirement to plan better. The NIS will be able to make estimates of their benefits when it's their turn to qualify. And so they can then plan with their own savings and their own investments to top up the NIS pension so they can live comfortably in old age.
Okay, if I can go to Ms. Tudor now in terms of living comfortably. A lot of people had questions. You have had all kinds of protests, sparks on the social media, etc. But I understand you have already begun to engage your social partners and are rolling out the necessary information to them in terms of letting them know what is what. You've also been meeting with some financial advisors. Tell us how that process has been going.
Good evening to our listeners and our viewers. From last year, where we laid the 17th Actuarial Report in Parliament, it has been a consultative process. We had town halls, as you could recall. We had a web email address where you could send information in, and people wrote in their submissions. So it is from those submissions, together with the various actuarial studies and so forth, that we were able to come up with the measures that you see there. So we have already begun to engage with our various begun to prepare the organization for these new measures, particularly the self-employed, and we'll talk about those a bit later. We've been speaking with our HR partners, BEC and so forth. So we have, throughout the entire process, consulted with our partners, and we intend to continue to do that. This week coming up, we have about four meetings scheduled where various constituents can come and sit, and we go through the measures, particularly the rationale behind. There were several modelings done, and we looked at various scenarios. So people ask, well, why 68 and not 69, or why not leave it? Those are some of the things that we discuss, and we will share with persons when they come to the various fora that we would be holding.
Okay. Now, I want to get back to Mr. Adams before we go to the break, and the Minister as well, to look at the issue of the investments that the fund might be looking to make, the agreement, the $40 million agreement with the Central Bank of Barbados, and what are safe instruments for us at this point to invest in?
Minister, would you like me to go first on that one?
Yeah,
on the investments. Yes, ask you.
When you think first, it's important to say that the National Insurance Fund has policy guidelines around investment that it follows, and these set out the things that it can invest in. For example, what percentage of its assets it will invest in bonds, what type of bonds, are they government bonds, are they corporate bonds, what percentage it will invest in shares and equities, and so forth. So given this permission from the central bank, which in effect is just allowing the NIS to carry a different currency. It already owns this asset. If the asset is cash in Barbados dollars, now it becomes cash in US dollars. It allows the NIS greater flexibility in meeting those policy guidelines and indeed in altering them slightly, because this is a new reality that we're looking at. Previously, it was very difficult to invest outside of Barbados. I think the last time foreign exchange permission was granted was 2008 or 2009. And in that period of time, you may know this data, but the economy had been underperforming, less than 1% on average growth in all that time. And yet 80% of the investments were in Barbados. So it became very important to diversify. So on top of those policy guidelines, with this new flexibility, the professional unit who manage the portfolio at the NIS can now look abroad to invest at least some of the funds as a way of diversifying what they've actually got. And diversification for anybody who is a finance person listening, I mean, that is known as the only free lunch in finance. It allows you to lower your risk whilst maintaining your return. And in this case, we think that the return can actually be enhanced because now there's a far wider range of things to invest in.
We have a caller on the line. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Wendy, to you and your callers, especially to Kim. Kim, this is Gregory. I don't know where you at, Shell. How are you? I'm your dad.
Go ahead with your question, sir.
All right. My question is, they say, I want to know what NIS stands for.
The National Insurance Scheme.
Right. But they say in the next 11 years that they might not have any. It could also be not in service in the next 11 years, isn't it?
Okay, the question is that within the next 11 years or so, the scheme might just disappear.
The scheme will not disappear in the next 11 years. That is the reason why we are acting now. And I want to say to the caller, I didn't hear the question, but I'm taking from what you said, Wendy, that the recognizing that we could have an issue between 2034 and 2041 is what caused government to take a decision that we would consult and that we would, out of those consultations, develop measures that would ensure we did not get to a situation of crisis. And the intention of the measures that we have announced, that I announced a couple of weeks ago, is to ensure that precisely the fear that the caller articulated does not become a reality. As we moved around Barbados, as we listened to stakeholders in stakeholder group meetings, the one of those things that was recurrent was that we want NIS to be around. Not that government needed to be told that, but I'm saying it because we wanted it to be around. But we recognize that the public generally wants the NIS to be around. And our intervention at this time is to ensure that it is around in 11 years, that it is around in 15 years, that it is around in 20 years, that it is around in 25 years from now. That is what has motivated us to act at this time.
Okay, we're going to go to commercial break quickly, and when we come back, we will look at the issue of the pensioners versus contributors ratio. People's Business will be back in a moment. And we're back. We're talking NIS securing the future. My guests, Kim Tudor, Derek Osborne, Minister Colin Jordan, and Rawdon Adams, the Deputy Chair of the NIS. Let's go quickly to another caller we have on the line. Good evening.
Hello, good night. Hello?
Yes, good night to you. Go right ahead.
Right, I would like to ask a question. I don't know if this question will probably be to Derek Osborne. I would like to know that you have that the retirement age, the minimum retirement age is going to be 61 in 2025, 62 in 2028, and 63 in 2031. What I am wanting to know, who will that affect? Will that affect a person that say is 59 that looking to retire next year, or would that be somebody in the 40s or 30s? That's something I would like to know.
Okay, I'll take the question. So as you mentioned, the year of the change is when the change takes place. So if somebody is now 59 and they're going to have their 60th birthday next year, and they stop working, they can choose to claim the pension next year. If they are 55 now, and when they turn 60, the age is 61, they'll have to wait till 61. So that first eligibility does change before they go to 68. And so it will affect some people who are already in their mid 50s.
Okay. Now, we know that the pensioners are living longer, but what is the ratio like now in terms of the pensioners versus contributors who are weighing heavier on the system? Kim or Mr. Osborne?
Well, I'll take it. They're just over two, I think just over two contributors now for every one pensioner. Back in the day, it was initially maybe over 10, and then it fell gradually. And if you think about a household who, 2 children to take care of their parents versus 5 children taking care of their parents, it's much more difficult. And so what we've seen in the last 15, 20 years is a reduction in the number of contributors, but a gradual increase in the number of pensioners. And so that the gap between contribution income today and benefit expenditure is about $250 million this year. And there you go on the screen. So we have the red line, which is the pensioner rate, is the number of pensioners. And the green line has been generally coming down. Yes, COVID had a big drop in 2020 and 2021. That's coming back up. So it's a combination of the economy, the labor market, and compliance that's been bringing the green line down.
Okay, we're going to go to a caller on the line, but when we return from that, I want to talk to you, Ms. Tudor, about how we're going to get the self-employed to be contributing to the scheme more. Good evening to you. Hello and good evening.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead. Yes,
Yes.
I can. Go right ahead.
I would like to ask this. It's a serious question. Why is it taking so long for people to get their sick benefit and their funeral grant?
I heard funeral grant. What is
Yeah.
the one before? Invalidity?
Yeah. No, I would like
Okay.
to know why why they are taking so long for people to get their sick benefit and the funeral grant.
Okay, you've heard that, Ms. Tudor. It's a query about the length of time it's taking for specific benefits, sickness and the funeral grants.
Certainly. We are in the process of preparing the organization for digitalization, and the digitalization will reduce the turnaround time for the payment of benefits. We are working right now with an overtime project that would reduce the turnaround time. And last month, we processed 1.5 times the amount that we normally process in a particular month. We process them, particularly sickness benefits. Now, injury and disablement and those kinds of benefits that require third-party intervention, for example, a written report from a physician and so forth, they take longer. But we recognize that, and we wish to reduce the turnaround time for the payment of benefits, and we are working towards that. So on a short-term basis, we're looking at overtime, and for a longer-term basis, we will want to move to a more digital platform where you're able to submit digitally, and in a lot of cases, that would eliminate the kind of errors that we see on the application. Something as simple as if you sent in your sick certificate and you don't have the last day of work. Officers then have to try to contact you by phone. If phone fails, then that's by letter, and all of that reduces the turnaround time. So once we are on a digital platform, it would require and validate your application at source, so that would shorten the time. But we are working towards it, both in the long term and the short term.
Okay. If I can come back to Minister Jordan quickly in terms of the minimum pension, it is being said that the minimum pension will not go below minimum wage.
That is correct. The intention of the scheme, even before the revitalization measures, place the average minimum pension in Barbados at a quite high level, both with respect to the independent measures of what would be considered the poverty line, which is a kind of a UN measurement, but also with respect to our comparison across other states, other member states in the Caribbean. Our minimum pension, has been and continues to be quite generous. There is not an intention to move that below the poverty line. And we recognize that we want to make sure that our seniors, when they reach those ages, that pensionable age, are able to enjoy a decent standard of living. And that is the intention of the measures that we've announced to make sure that we can continue to deliver on the promise that we have made to the people of this country.
Okay, Ms. Tudor, I want to come back to you before
Yes.
it's time to go to break on the issue of the self-employed and getting more of them to plug into the scheme effectively. Now, let's take, for example, a car washer. You're not going to wash the same amount of cars every week. So the monies earned will be fluctuating. What is a best fit for individuals like those who really do want to contribute to the scheme because, they're going to age, you can't lift that bucket of water, you can't move that hose as fast? What are you proposing for those individuals?
So thank you very much, Wendy, for that question. We in these pension reforms, and even before, recognize the kind of work that the car washer does, the fisherman, the entertainer, for example. And so our aim is to ensure that the system is flexible and can accommodate the nature of the work and the payments that they do. So if you could see on the screen, let me start with the first one, no forms. No, in the past, self-employed persons paid quarterly, which meant they came 4 times per year, and they had to bring a form because you could pay, but you absolutely had to bring a form. You complete the form stating your earnings. The new system, you don't have to bring a form. There's no due date. So you can pay 365 days, all the days that we are open, you can come and pay. So if as an entertainer and crop over has been very good to you, you're a dancer, you're a backup singer or whatever, and crop over has been great to you, you can come and in August and pay all the money for the rest of the year. Seasonal workers, you can come and pay the season, and we will spread it over. So we are going to accommodate you if you don't require to bring any forms. There's no specific time that when you have to pay. There are no penalties, and you can certainly pay anytime during the year. And one of the things that we are introducing, which is very positive, the self-employed persons will now be covered for employment injury. Previously, self-employed persons weren't covered for employment injury, and self-employed persons are prone to the same kinds of injuries that an employed person would get. You are a carpenter and you accidentally hit your hand or something, you can have an injury as well. So we are going to make that change in the plans coming up for next year and going forward. What we intend to do is to introduce into the organization an outreach unit. This unit will go out to the various areas. Like for example, we would go out probably using a mobile office, go out to, for example, Oystins, and we go, say, the 20th of every month, and all of those self-employed persons who are near and around that vicinity can come and make their payments, ask any questions, and we're going to do that. So you're going to see a lot more outreach from us, not only in terms of collecting payments and so forth, but in providing information and education. So these self-employed have a lot to look forward to, and we intend over the next 6 months, as the minister had said in a previous time, that we will embark on a six months to a year educational campaign, which will help the self-employed to understand the new system and how it benefits them.
Okay, and that's a great point to end on, because we're going to go to break, and then when we return, we have a caller on the line. The People's Business will be back. We're going to head straight to those phone lines. Good evening to you.
Hello, good evening. Yeah, I just want to make 2 points, right? The first, I am tired of hearing moderators and national insurance people saying that the pensioners are living longer. No one has no one life in hand. Only God controls the lifespan of a person. The second, if the national insurance money going to run out, why are the national insurance investing so much money that belongs to the NIS overseas? I want an answer from the two of them. Thank you very much.
Mr. Adams, I don't know if perhaps you want to tackle this issue of overseas
I'd
investment
be
for the
happy to.
caller.
I'd be happy to. I think we are delighted that lifespan is increasing. That shows the success of previous policies of all governments. On the second question, I think you have to start by understanding how the pay-as-you-go system is set up. You know, we have contributors who pay in a given month, and the money they pay in is going out immediately to pensioners, for example. There's no little fund to one side that individuals can tap into. But when those contributions are greater than the benefit expenditure, i.e. there's a surplus, it goes into a fund. And that fund seeks to invest those surpluses in order to secure the greatest return on income for a day when it's needed to finance a deficit. So today, we are in a situation where benefits are exceeding income by a very considerable amount. The forecast of the actuary is that by the mid-2030s, that deficit will be $500 million a year. A decade after that, it will be $1 billion a year, and it's doubling approximately every every 12 years. So the fund, in investing its surpluses, and it still has $4 billion of surpluses to invest, although that is declining to finance these deficits, it still has an obligation to seek the greatest return that it can. So it is not the case, as seemed to be implied, that money being invested is not going towards obligations that the NIS has towards pensioners and other beneficiaries. Quite the contrary. The surplus investments are seeking the greatest return that they can possibly get in order to finance any future deficits that arise. Now, the reason the money is going abroad is all to do with diversification. It's a best portfolio management practice to diversify your holdings. It's a little bit like not carrying all your eggs in one basket. You drop the basket, all the eggs break. And I think we've seen in our recent history that when you are overexposed in a single geography, a single investment like government bonds, and a single currency, you're running a danger that you don't need to run if you can diversify more broadly on all three of those, whether it be a country, a currency, or indeed an asset class. So I hope that answers the question.
I want to know if these investments, if crypto could be considered in making these investments, and then I'll go to the minister who has his hand up.
The NIS does not invest in any cryptocurrency that I'm aware of, has no plans to do that I'm aware of, none at all.
Okay. Minister?
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. I'm going back to the first question the first matter the caller raised. I think I understand where he is coming from. And I just want to say from the perspective of a policymaker that as we try to determine the health of a social security scheme, there are certain measurements that we have to take into consideration. We have to know how much is coming in and how much is going out. But beyond knowing how much is coming in and how much is going out now, we also have to be projecting. We have to be looking down the road at what we expect to be coming in and what we expect to be going out. That is the reason why we are forced, let me put it that way, and I'm responding specifically to where I think he's coming from. That is the reason why we are forced to look at what we refer to as demographic factors. So that, for example, we have to look at birth rate, we have to look at size of population, we have to look at the trend in terms of the size of population. We also have to look at average life expectancy, because one of the determinants of what will have to be paid out would be how long will persons be drawing a pension. So we're not trying to play God. Far, far, far from. We will never do that. But we have to take certain factors into consideration, because a social security scheme is not one that you can manage just on a year-by-year basis. You have to be looking down the road to see what is coming, what are the trends. And like the situation we're in now, we are recognizing that down the road, we are not saying that we determine what happens down the road, but based on the trends that we are seeing now, we are using the brains that God has given to us to say, look, it seems as if this is where the numbers, the trends are taking us, and it is based on those trends that we have then to make decisions on the Social Security scheme, the National Insurance scheme. I just thought I would want to say that because I sense, I think I sense where the caller is coming from. I do not want to leave him feeling uncomfortable about what we're doing. Him or any others who may also have that perspective.
Thank you. Now we have a caller on the line. Good evening to you.
Good evening, ma'am. I just want to find out, why is it like the Four Seasons project they got the government investing money from the national insurance fund in funds of that project. Then they write it off, right? And people know that old national insurance fund for the workers, you keep writing it off and not carrying the people to court to collect those funds. That is part of the problem as well. Too. I want to know why you keep doing it all.
I'm not understanding the second part of your question clearly. You spoke to
ma'am.
the investment in Four Seasons,
Yes.
but then you were talking about putting off some
People-
other payment
right,
to workers.
they're writing it off.
Which workers?
No, what I'm saying, you employers and the employees. The employees supposed to put in national insurance for the employees, refusing to put it in.
Oh, you're
And-
talking about defaulting employers.
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. Okay, I don't know, maybe we can divide this in two. Mr. Adams, you can take the Four Seasons part, and Ms. Tudor, you can speak to the defaulting employers. Mr. Adams?
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. So we've heard about the Four Seasons quite a lot. Even when we did petitions a year ago, this came up. And we made the point that the amount of the investment that the NIS approved for the actual amount dispersed was $9.6 million. A far larger sum has been bandied about as NIS exposure, but that's incorrect. It was $9.6 million, and that is a relatively tiny amount compared to the size of the fund. The reality is that some investments go sour. Not every investment is going to be a winner, and I think that was the case in this one. But on the second part of the question about the collection amounts and compliance, I think I'll defer to one of the other panelists.
Yes. Okay, you now, Ms. Tudor, dealing with the defaulting employers who take the NIS benefits out but never pay them in on the workers' behalf.
Wendy, we take compliance very seriously. We use all the measures at our disposal to go after defaulters. So we take it very seriously. We have stepped up our efforts in terms of compliance because we know compliance is going to be very important in playing its role in the sustainability of the fund. So we have certainly stepped up our efforts. Since last year, we have done two consultancies. One was internal, where we got staff, the inspectors, and other persons who work in compliance to kind of review our processes and so forth and procedures to see how we can improve these processes and procedures in an attempt to ensure that that we are increasing our compliance. We also got an external consultant, and their reports are due anytime now. And together with these two reports, we will begin to enhance and increase and enlarge our compliance measures. But we certainly...
Will this enlargement look at any possibility of, say, litigation or seizure of assets or halting operations of the business for a time until said monies are paid on workers' behalf, especially when we're dealing with individuals in workplaces who get pregnant, need their maternity monies, need their paternity money, because we have paternity leave now as well. How far-ranging are these compliance measures likely to be?
So Wendy, let me just say one thing. If the employer is taking out the NIS, but he is sending the schedules to us, which means we do have a record. We do not in any way disadvantage the employee. So if your employer has sent in the schedules, and despite the fact that he may not have sent in any money, the employee will still get their benefits. So Wendy, we have increased the requirements for clearance certificates. So you'll see that persons who have to buy land or sell land, and we are holding a judgment on their properties, they require a clearance certificate. So you'll see more of that kind of compliance with clearance certificates. We have judgments. We have an entire legal department, and some of the work we also give to private lawyers, because we do go after employers, and we will put a charge on their property, and that charge comes into force, especially if they want to sell that property or mortgage that property or do any such thing. So we do pursue on a daily basis the legal remedies available to us with regard to compliance.
Okay, are you in a
However,
position to tell me how many might be on the radar currently?
no, I'm not in a position to tell you how many on the
Okay.
radar currently, because equal to pursuing them, I also sign discontinuance certificates, which means that they have come in and made satisfactory arrangements, and in a lot of cases paid off. And in that regard, I will sign a legal certificate called a discontinuance certificate, where we are no longer pursuing a judgment against that person. So I signed those too. Last year, when we had the amnesty over the period April to June, 198 companies came in and made arrangements to settle their indebtedness to us over a two-year period. So I would say that we certainly have stepped up our efforts in terms of compliance, and so has persons who were previously in default. And certainly, as the economy improved coming out of COVID, we did see a lot more compliance.
Okay, we have a caller on the line, and we're going to go to them quickly before we go to break. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Yeah, I'm
Go right
trying
ahead.
to find out if you're between the age of 57 with the pension, will that affect you, or will have to go to 61?
Derek?
For the
She's
very first
57 and she
qualification.
wants to know if she has to go to 61.
So yes, her age will be 61 because the age does change in 2025, I think it is.
Okay, so we can no longer talk about wanting to retire at 55 then.
No. So again, so the option is there for early pension, and retiring does not mean that you have to claim NIS right away. So some people have made preparations, and hopefully most people have made preparations. Some people have pension plans linked to their employer. So when they retire from the employer, that pension kicks in right away, and the NIS can be taken at the first eligible age if they're fully retired, or if they're partially retired, they have to wait till 67 or 67 and a half, or eventually 68. So there are options, and I think each person should look at their circumstances today, look at their age, look at how the schedule of change is going to take place, and determine, where they fall into the mix and what new plans they need to put in place to ensure that they can be comfortable when it's their turn to get.
Okay, when we return after the break, Derek, we'll explore the idea of some of those plans and how people should be looking at pensions, especially not just the NIS pension, but pension in general, to ensure that they have continuity and at a decent level in their life. The People's Business will be back after the break. And we're back. We're going to go to those callers who've been on the line waiting anxiously. Good evening to you.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well. Just go right ahead with your
I'm
question.
going right ahead with the question. Why is it that the police officers have to work all that long time, 70 or so, 65, 70, but the defense force personnel, they don't have to do that. Police is more into it than them. They're more busy with public duty, even these defense officers.
Okay. She's talking about the age of retirement for the Barbados Defense Force versus that of the police service. I don't know who wants to take it, Derek, Kim.
If I can
go right ahead.
Yeah, maybe if I can start on that, the matter of the type of occupation that one can comfortably do at particular ages is one that is under consideration at this point. We recognize that not every occupation can be done to maybe even an age of 60. But that is a matter we have to discuss very carefully. We have to consider all the implications of it. We've already been mandated, my ministry and the Ministry of People Empowerment, to work through those occupations that may be more suitable to persons at a particular age or stage in their lives. And that information then will be considered by Cabinet along with any other studies that need to be done to make any final determinations. We do recognize, for example, that maybe a security guard is expected to run, or a police officer expected to run behind someone versus a security officer or police officer who may be at a desk or at a post. So there are these differences that need to be taken into consideration, and so that outside of the adjustment measures that we have announced that we're engaging in now, that is still a matter that needs to be addressed, and that would have needed to be addressed even if we did not have these revitalization measures. And so I just want to assure the caller that we are going to be looking at those situations.
But I'm glad you mentioned the idea of the security guards, because when you go around, you tend to see, well, it's more so with males from what I see, who would have retired from a job maybe in the public service or some other place, but because of how situations are, maybe starting a new family, etc., you then find them after 65 having to return to work. So the 68 probably, isn't so bad after all, because there are some people who find that they have to return to work for whatever reason.
Yes, and that is the reason why matters like determining various occupations has to be done carefully, because there are people, for example, on the Friday that I made the ministerial statement, a gentleman said to us something very similar. As a matter of fact, he said he is not planning to retire at all. But what we had to remind is that we do not have a national retirement age. We have a pensionable age. And so a person is free to work for as long as a person believes that they can make that contribution or desires to make that contribution. So on the retirement side, there's no retirement age, but there's a pensionable age that recognizes that at some point, a former worker, needs to be provided for after contributing over the years to the building of the society.
Okay. Now we have less than 5 minutes left. I would have spoken to you about your parting shots in terms of what we want people to understand about the NIS. And I will start with you, Ms. Tudor, then Mr. Osborne, then Mr. Adams, and the last one to the minister. So, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Wendy, we at the NIS take our role as stewards very seriously, recognizing that it is the lifeline for a lot of persons. And we have embarked on a continuous improvement campaign, just like all other organizations, where we are going to continuously improve the service we deliver. And so I want to take this opportunity to thank the staff at the NIS for all the hard work that they do and they have been doing, especially the team that is preparing the organization to implement these new measures. So thanks to all the staff, and the public can continue to look forward for improving service from the NIS.
Okay. Mr. Osborne?
Sure. Thank you very much, Wendy. So my closing remarks would be about teamwork. And essentially, it's a team effort that's needed to strengthen and revitalize the NIS. It starts with the economy, and the harder we work, the more productive we are, the more jobs we can create, make Barbados more attractive to investments, both locally and abroad. And then the NIS on the compliance side, and employers, employers who do contributions every month need to pay the contributions. And finally, self-employed persons. Not so much about sustainability, but for them, it's their lifeline when they can't work anymore. And only 1 in 8 right now pay contributions. So there are going to be many, many older persons, in Barbados in the next 15, 20 years without a secure pension. And so we really want them to come forward and, pay with this new flexible approach, flexible whenever they want, no forms, when they have the cash to secure their pension when it's their turn to get.
Okay, Mr. Adams?
Thanks, Wendy. My closing remarks are around the collective nature of the scheme. The strength of this system historically has been collective action and what it guarantees. And in the current debate, I hate that people lose sight of that. We have a very good system, a very strong minimum pension guarantee. And I would ask that people who are concerned and look at our system and wondering whether these reforms are appropriate, go to the NIS website, download the report, and inform themselves of what's been done, the history behind the scheme, how it actually works, and then take a position. This is not easy, that the work that's gone into this. There is no silver bullet, as the Minister mentioned at the top of the program, and it is very important to understand all the moving parts before pronouncing judgment. We've got a good set of recommendations here, and I think people really do need to understand what's happening when they partake in the debate.
Okay, Minister?
Thank you very much, Wendy, and thanks to all callers who participated. I conclude by saying a couple of things. One is that we have a situation that is based primarily on what we refer to as demographic factors. And I spoke to some of those when I responded to the gentleman. We have a declining population, a declining workforce, and that is the primary driver of the challenges that are ahead of us if we fail to act. So we have to recognize that, and we deal with the reality that poses to us. The second thing I want to say is that national insurance is about social security. It is about all of us coming together. This is the Bayesian way. This goes back to the SUSU and the median turn. It also informs how we deal with education, for example. Everybody pays taxes so that we can educate the nation's children. If you have enough money to send your children to university in Canada or England, you can go ahead, but your taxes help to support the education of those who don't have that luxury.
Okay.
We do the same thing with healthcare. And we just want to say all of us are in this together. All of us need to pay. All of us need to contribute. Employers, employees, self-employed, all of us need to be part of the solution. And the final thing, which is the third, so more than a couple, early action is always preferable. Early action. Let us not, as a people, decide to wait until we have to take, until the country has to take any drastic action. I appeal to all of us, let's recognize dealing with these matters early means that any potential pain is minimized. And that is the position that the government has taken. That is the position that I am appealing to Barbadians to accept.
Okay, I want to thank in an interesting conversation, and I'm sure that some of the concerns of our viewers have been alleviated. Remember, national insurance is your lifetime. NIS, securing the future. I'm Wendy Burke. Do enjoy your evening.